In this video you'll learn how to play Cities and Knights. I've played the game for many years and I win around 60% of my Cities and Knights games. My name is Trigosaurus and I will tell you exactly what the differences between the Settlers of Catan and Cities and Knights are. You will also learn how strong I believe the progress cards are, and I will cover them in 12 awesome differences between Cities and Knights and the base game. If that's something you're interested in, then I believe you want to watch this video. Let's dive into difference number 1, the Barbarians. Barbarians look to attack your cities and the cities of your opponents. They have the same strength as the total amount of cities on the board, and you need to defend your cities with knights. You have a difference in the dice. You have a white dice, a red dice, and the colored dice or something like that. Which 3 sides of that dice have Barbarians. Then each time you roll the Barbarian, you move 1 step off the path. And you also have the trade side, the politics side, and the science side, which I will cover later in this video. If the Barbarians reach the point they can attack, so that's the end of their path, you look at how many cities are there on the board versus how many knights are there. If there's more cities than knights, the Barbarians win. If the Barbarians win, the players with the lowest amount of knights, so the lowest amount of defense, lose a city. Unless you have enough knights to protect your own city. So for example, you have 2 cities on the board, but the total amount of knights is still lower than the total amount of cities. You need to have 2 knights activated to beat the Barbarians yourself. And you won't lose a city. Difference number 2. How to use knights and cities and knights. You can't buy development cards in Cities and Knights, but instead you can place your knight on the board. You can build or promote a knight by spending a sheep and an ore, and you can activate your knight with wheat. If you build a knight at the start, you have a level 1 knight, but if you promote it, you have a level 2 knight, and you can have a level 3 knight as well. The level 3 knight can't be accessed until you have level 3 in politics, which I will cover in number 3. You can place a basic knight on an unoccupied intersection of your own road. Something I would like to mention as well is that you can have a maximum of 2 knights per level. So you can have 2 level 1 knights and 1 level 2 knight, but you can't have 3 level 1 knights. There's a maximum of 6 knights you can have, so 2 level 3, 2 level 2, 2 level 1. Knights can be moved as well. If they are activated, you can move them to another intersection. And you can also attack opponents' knights with your knights if your and their road cross the same intersection and the knight is on that. But that doesn't happen that often. A knight becomes inactive after any kind of action. There's also 2 other functions the knight has, but I will explain that later on in the video. Difference number 3, the city calendar. My favorite part of Cities and Knights is the city calendar. You can upgrade them with commodities, and these are like resources, but a little bit different, and you can get them. They kind of replace some of the resources you get. City improvements are made for one of the 3 commodities. They have 3 paths and 5 upgrades. The first upgrade costs 1 commodity, the second one costs 2 commodities on that path, and you can gain progress cards with them as well. So these are like the new development cards, but that depends on what the red die and the barbarian dice roll. If they roll, for example, trade plus a 3 and you have your city calendar upgraded to the path you can get that progress card, you gain a progress card from that. How do you know if you are able to get a progress card from that? Actually quite simple. The first upgrade gives you the 1 and the 2 on the red dice. The second upgrade gives you the 3. The third upgrade gives you the 4. The fourth upgrade gives you the 5, and the 5th upgrade gives you the 6 on the die. So if you then roll trade 4, you need to have 3 improvements on your city calendar for the trade path. Difference number 4, commodities. Commodities can be gained by cities only, so not by settlements. Cities on the sheep tiles, the wood tiles, and the ore tiles. They will give you paper for wood. So instead of, if you have a city in wood, instead of getting 2 wood, you get 1 wood and a paper. Instead of 2 ore for a city, you get 1 ore and a coin. Instead of 2 sheep, you get 1 sheep and a clove. So like I said, one improvement on the city calendar costs an exponential amount of commodities. I believe if you get the city calendar to the 3rd improvement, for trade you can then trade commodities at a 2-for-1 ratio. So if you have 2 clove, you can trade them for a coin, or you can trade them for a wheat or whatever. You can also trade 4-to-1 from the start of the game, like for example 4 wheat for a coin or 4 wheat for a paper. With the politics one, that's the coin with the ore, you can get level 3 knights. So they are quite strong and they will give you points later on in the game. And in my opinion, the best one is the aqueduct, which you can get if you level science to level 3, which you can do with paper from the wood tiles. And the aqueduct has the special ability that each time a number rolls where you don't get any resources but others do, you can choose a free resource. No commodities, but you can choose a free resource. And I think that's really, really strong, especially if you can get it earlier on in the game. It's probably as strong as a city. It's like amazing. Well, depending on how many numbers you have. But if you don't have many numbers, so you have much of the same numbers or not enough resource gain, it's so strong. And that's why you will see players trying to build their city on lumber as much as possible. Difference number 5, progress cards. Progress cards are the replacements for development cards, but they have a much wider use, like you can do a lot more with them. You have 3 paths. You have the science one, the politics one, and the trade ones. I will go over each one of them and tell you if they are basically good or what you can do with it. So we start with science. So the science can be upgraded with paper from the wood tiles, and I believe these are the best as well. Like, it's the most versatile. You can use them in any situation. The politics one is more when you're behind in the game, they're really strong, and the trade one is really strong if you have a lot of the same resources, because you can make many 2-for-1 trades. So we start with the alchemist, and the alchemist you can activate before you roll. This is like the only interaction in Cities and Knights. You can activate it before you roll, but you don't decide what the barbarian dice will roll. So that can be still be a barbarian, can be trade, can be science, can be politics. The second one is crane, and with crane you can build your city improvement with 1 commodity less. So for example, you want to get your politics city path to level 3, but you only have 2 coin commodities. You use the crane and you can get it for 2. So you only spend 2 instead of 3. So pretty good as well. Pretty versatile. The engineer. You may build 1 city wall for free. It's not the strongest one. City walls aren't that strong, but I will explain later on in the video what a city wall is. Inventory. Swap 2 number tokens of your choice, but you can't swap the 12, the 2, the 6 or the 8. So the strongest numbers and the weakest numbers. So the exchange you see most of the time is the 5 or 9 gets exchanged with a 3 or an 11. And you prefer to more resource gain. It's a really, really strong card, especially if you can get it earlier on in the game. Yeah, it can help you gain like 5 or 6 resources over the course of the game. So yeah, that's really, really strong. Irrigation, collect 2 wheat for every, wheat tile you are settled on. So that can be really strong if you have a lot of settlements. Like, it doesn't count for each settlement, but it counts for each wheat tile you are settled on. So if you're settled on 2 wheat tiles, you gain 4 wheat. If you're settled on 1 wheat tile, you get 2 wheats. Can be 6, can be 8. So that can be really, really strong. It doesn't have to be. Medicine is really strong. You can activate this and then you only need to spend 2 ore and a wheat to build a city. Pretty straightforward and pretty good. Mining does the same as irrigation, but you gain ore instead of wheat, and it all works the same. So also pretty good. Printer, you gain a victory point. You don't need to play this. Road building does the same as the road building you knew from the base game. Pretty good. In Smith, you can promote 2 of your knights with 1 level. So I think that's pretty good. If you have 2 level 1 knights, you can both make them level 2. You gotta make sure you don't screw up by trying to get 3 knights of the same level. Rule still applies that you need to have level 3 in the politics department before you can promote your knights to level 3 knights. So it's still the same, but it's a really, really good one. It might gain you like 2, 3 or even more victory points over the course of the game if your opponents can't keep up with the speed you build your knights, and that's usually the case. So we go off to the politics one. We have bishop, and this is a knight, and it's a bit stronger than the knight because you can move the robber. And oh, something I forgot to mention, when you get a progress card, you can use it instantly. You don't need to wait 1 turn. You can move the robber, draw 1 resource or commodity from each player who has at least 1 settlement or city next to the robber's new hex. So yeah, so basically you move the robber and you get a random resource from each of the player that is settled on that tile you placed the robber on. Really, really strong. Constitution. This is also just a victory point, and it also plays immediately. You don't need to activate it. Deserter. Choose another player, and this is a pretty good one. You can choose one of your opponents, and they have to remove a knight from the board. They can choose which knight themselves. So for example, if they only have a level 2 knight, you can choose them and they will have to remove the knight. And the bonus thing about this, you can place a level 2 knight yourself on the board. I think that's crazy, crazy strong. You do need to have some space on the board for it, but that makes sense, I believe. Also, the deserted knight, and I really love the name for it, will stay active or inactive depending on what it was for your opponent. Really strong to use just before the Barbarians attack because you get your defense up and they don't. Diplomat may remove an open road, so that's a road. Like there is no knight on the other side or a settlement or a city on the other side. So a naked road is a term that's used as well. You can remove that from the board. You can also choose to remove one of your own roads and then replace it somewhere else. You can build that road. So you may not remove one of your opponent's road and place your own. Pretty okay. It really is situational though, but usually you can use this card pretty effectively. It's not really strong, but you can use it. Intrigue. You may displace an opponent's knight. Yeah, this one is pretty bad. It must be on one of your roads or shipping lines. So this is like, you can use it really well if you have a road to where the knight is placed. And if the player who owns the knight or hired the knight doesn't have a spot available where he can move it towards. So then it's pretty strong. Because then the knight just gets destroyed. But it's obviously worse than the deserter, because you can just choose and don't have all these conditions. And you also get one knight of your own with the deserter. One thing you could use it for is to destroy a level 3 knight. But I think you have enough room on the board and enough roads. When a level 3 knight gets attacked, you are pretty far in the game and you have enough space to move it to. Something I forgot to mention is you can hold 4 of these progress cards in your hand at the same time. If you get a 5th, then at the end of your turn you can remove one of those cards from your hand, and I very often choose Intrigue to remove from my hand. Okay, the Saboteur. When you play this card, so this is like one of the few cards that's really strong when you're behind in the game. When you play this card, each player who has as many or more, so if you're at 4 and red's at 4 and blue's at 7, they both have to discard half of their hand. So if they have 9 resources or commodities in hand, they need to give up 4. With 10, they need to give up 5. So that's pretty much the same as a robber, but you can choose to do it whenever you want. And that's pretty strong, especially later in the game when players have 10 cards in hand. You can need them to give up on a city or something like that. Really, really good card. Spy. This is, I think, the best one, but I'm not quite sure. I think it's I think it's the best one, but it's close. You can look at another player's hand, not the resources and the commodities, but you can look at their progress card, and you may choose one card to take and add to your hand. So what's really strong is if your opponent has like 2 or 3 or even 4 progress cards in hand, you use it and you steal a spy from them. So then you effectively get 2 progress cards for 1, and well, you get 1 and they lose 1, and you can also choose a really good one. But if you choose a spy, then you can actually do it twice. So yeah, it's pretty simple and it's really, really good. Okay, the Warlord, you can activate all the knights that are inactive at the moment at the same time with this card. It's not that strong, but it's pretty okay. If you don't gain a lot of weight, it's useful to have, for sure. Wedding. Each of your opponents who has more victory points than you must give you 2 resources or commodities of their choice. It's a pretty okay card, but you gotta be behind in victory points for it. Can be really strong earlier on in the game. Note for this one, the opponents must have more than 2 victory points, and they can choose themselves what resources and commodities they want to give. So it's a lot worse than the Saboteur, and also other cards we're about to see with similar effects to this one. Okay, onto the trade ones. I really like these progress cards and how they work and how to value them. So the Commercial Harbor. You may offer the other players a resource. So for example, you have 3 bricks in your hand, and so you offer 1 brick to the first player and they will have to give you a commodity of their choice. So you can decide what resource to give up, and they can decide what commodity to give back to you. So you basically trade. It's like a Pokemon trade, but on average commodities are a bit better than the resource. It's a pretty okay card. I don't use it as much as I think I should, but I think it's pretty good if you use it well. I should use it better, I think, than I do currently. So I might have different opinions on this card like in a few weeks later, but pretty good card. Master Merchant, and this one is really strong, but a bit situational. You gotta be behind the victory points, and you can look at their hand, so that's really valuable because you know what cards are in there if you didn't keep track of it, which is actually a lot more difficult in Cities and Knights than in the base game. So you gotta look at their hand, and you can decide what resources and or commodities you want to take from them. So yeah, this one is really good. You get the information, which is key, and you also get the cards, and you can, it's really valuable, but you need to behind the victory points. The reason why I argued the spy might not be the strongest one, because the merchant is in here, but I figured if you have the spy, you can steal the merchant from your opponents. The merchant, for starters, it gains you a victory point, which is like the longest road one. As long you have the merchant on one of your hexes, you have that victory point. So you can place the merchant. It's a bit like a robber, but totally different. So you can place it on one of the tiles you are settled on, and you can trade that resource in 2 for 1. So it's like, well, a movable port. So if you gain a lot of bricks, you want to settle it on the brick 1. So you can trade your bricks in for other resources you can use, or other commodities, of course. So you can exchange these bricks for commodities or resources you can use at that moment better. The robber does not affect the merchant, if you wanted to know that. So the merchant fleet is the next one. The merchant fleet is a temporary merchant, but it doesn't give you a victory point. So you can choose 1 resource and you can trade that in 2 for 1. So it's like a port for a turn. Can be used pretty well. Really situational though. We only have 2 left for the trade one, and first one of these is the resource monopoly. So it's basically like the normal monopoly you know and hate, but there is one difference, because there is a limit of 2 resources a player can give to you. So it's a bit more balanced. The other one is the trade monopoly, and this one gets used for commodities, so only commodities. So you gotta have a little bit of understanding what commodities are in here. and this one is limited to one commodity. The resource monopoly and the trade monopoly are, yeah, I think the resource monopoly is better. In most cases you gain like 5 or 6 resources if you play with 4 players, so that depends a little bit as well. If you play with 3, the resource monopoly is a little bit worse. They are both pretty good, but they are both a bit situational, of course. I think the resource monopoly can be more effective in more situations than the trade monopoly. Okay, difference number 6. So knights can interrupt road. That means you can place your knight between roads. Like for example, if red has the longest road and you place a knight between his roads, you can cut their road in half. You can also use it to cut off people. So to win a race, for example. On to difference number 7, that's also a knight one. You can chase away robbers with knights. So that's still a bit of the same as in the base game, but it's also totally different. Your knight has to be activated and then you can click on it. On the tiles that are surrounding the knight, you can chase away the robber from those tiles. Your knight gets deactivated after that, but you can also place the robber on one of your opponent's tiles. I think that's pretty good. If you build your first knight, you also want to look at where is my strongest resource game, where do I get blocked, so you want to build your knight there. Difference number 8. Which resources are the best? It's a bit different than in the 4-player base game, which is the official tournament mode, but not that much. But they are good for different reasons. So for example, the development cards aren't a thing, so that really impacts the sheep, wheat, ore strategy. But sheep, wheat and ore have other uses with building the knight with ore and sheep and activating the knight with wheat. So that's why they are still pretty strong and really important earlier on in the game. So the dynamic is a bit different. Also cities are crazy strong, so still having a lot of wheat and a lot of ore gain, especially ore gain, makes a big difference in the game. What's different here is that you want to set your cities on lumber so you can get the aqueduct going with the paper commodity gain. I think brick is even worse than in the regular game. However, if you play with 3 players, brick gets a little bit better, especially if you have a good lumber gain with because you can build more roads and those space around you in a 3-player game can make a big difference. Difference number 9. The biggest army doesn't exist because you can't buy development cards and can't get knights. Difference number 10. Until the first barbarian attack, there is a friendly robber. And what does that mean? So if you roll a 7, you can't move the robber, but you can still lose resources if you have more than 7 cards in your hand. Or commodities. Difference number 11. This is actually 2 differences. You play till 13 victory points unless you play with the Seafarers expansion, then it's more. And you can gain some victory points in a different way by becoming the defender of Catan. You can get them by having the most amount of knights when the knights are victorious against the barbarians. If you have the most amount of knights, so level 1 is 1 knight, level 2 counts as 2 knights, and level 3 is 3. At the moment you and your opponents defeat the barbarians, you gain a victory point. So that's pretty simple. But what if 2 or even more players have the same amount of knights when you defeat the barbarians? Then you all get a progress card of your choice. So you can't, well, a little bit of note on that, you can't choose exactly what card you will get, because then everyone just takes the spy. But you can choose whether to get a science one or a politics progress card or a trade one. I often go for, I've tried a little bit with the trade and the politics one, but I think the science one is by far the best, especially earlier on in the game. If you're behind, I might take the politics one, but I still think the science one is better in that case, because it's a little bit more well used. You don't get cards like intrigue and stuff. I think the science one is just the one to take. The 12th difference is city walls, and I'm not a huge fan of city walls, but they have some uses. You can build your city. You can only build city walls obviously when you have a city, and they cost 2 bricks. And bricks don't have that much use in the game. Usually I don't pick them that very much, as you will see in the game played on the screen. So that's why I don't use them very often, and also their effect is a bit limited. If you gain a lot of resources, they can be really effective. For each city wall you have, and they stack up, you can hold 2 more cards in your hand and don't get punished by the robber. So if a 7 gets rolled, but I don't think it's a really good one, especially because you don't want to hold the cards in your hand. So many progress cards want to destroy the cards in your opponent's hand that I don't think city walls make a big difference. You want to spend your resources anyways. So in my opinion, you shouldn't pick brick. You don't need to value that much, and therefore you don't have a lot of brick in the game, and you don't need to build city walls. If you think this list doesn't cover all the major differences between cities and knights and the base game, please let me know in the comments. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe or like if you enjoyed the video. I hope to get you started a little bit with cities and knights, because this is such a fun game mode. But it's pretty difficult because you have so many things, especially when you're just getting started with the game, so many things to keep track of. Like, do I do the city calendar now, or do I use this progress card now, and what's the best moment? Then I think you don't want to hold your stuff as long as possible, but you also want to find a good moment to use the progress card or to use your stuff. And also something I forgot to mention is you can also play cities and knights in King of Catan. King of Catan is an ongoing Catan Universe Tournament I host with lots of players in the community. We regularly get games in, actually quite a lot. Also, if you want to join the tournament, you can do whenever you want. Sign up form and rules, and a small video I made explaining how the tournament works, or in the description. I hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for watching.